California is no stranger to wildfires, but the impacts of the drought, which have ebbed and flowed in the state for the better part of a decade, have been concentrated in Northern California's dense forests the past several years. The result? Fiery infernos which have become so dangerous, some firefighters have likened the intensity to a bomb going off.
On any given day, I would say, welcome to my home. This is what is left of my home, just outside the forest ranch area. A fire crew that fought valiantly to save every house on this hill at least took a shot at it and were nice enough to let us up there. That was our garage, the living room over there. There was a porch. Back there, the bedrooms. No pets left behind. Family out, cars out, safe, but you can see my hose right here, valiantly trying to do something, but
I remember sitting on my grandma's couch at her home in the central San Diego suburb of Claremont, watching open-mouthed as local CBS reporter Larry Himmel reported live from his family's burning home. I was in high school and hoped to be a journalist someday. My own family and all our pets had evacuated to my grandma's house to escape the fires burning across San Diego County in 2007. We were lucky. Our house was spared. But like Larry Himmel, my parents' friends had also lost their house in the blaze. Fire season, as Californians call it, was the time of year each fall where we collectively held our breath, hoping hot, dry Santa Ana winds would not turn a spark into a devastating blaze. But as Courthouse News reporter Matt Renda, who covers wildfires up and down the state, told me, wildfires in California no longer have a season. They're year-round now. Here's our conversation. You've covered wildfires for Courthouse News for several years, and you also did so previously for other publications. Are wildfires in the state getting worse?
I think that undoubtedly they're getting worse. I think if you look at the statistics, the top 10 largest and most devastating in terms of property and the loss of life, fatal wildfires, the balance of them have occurred in the last 3 years. Starting in 2017 with the wine country fires, obviously the Camp Fire has been terrible. And unfortunately, we are undergoing another devastating wildfire season at present. We have two major wildfires burning right now, the Dixie Fire, which is the second largest in state history, and the Calder Fire, which started a couple days ago, which actually I will be traveling to beginning tomorrow. I think undoubtedly the statistics show, and just the eye test show, that wildfires are growing, or they're worsening in the state.
What specifically is causing wildfires in California to be bigger, to burn faster, and to just be more lethal?
I think undoubtedly climate change is having an effect. I think that there's an increasing scientific consensus that our surface, our daily temperatures in California are getting hotter, and that creates low humidity and a better environment for fires to flourish and burn hotter. Scientists and meteorologists think that the droughts are caused by a changing climate, and of course droughts mean drier fuel conditions, less water, and a forest environment that's more susceptible to large fires. That said, there are other people who claim that forest management is an issue. Some people, for instance, in the timber industry, say that, we're not taking enough trees out of the forest. And some of the scientists, some of the foresters that I've spoken with, they do think that California forests are more dense than they were historically. And one of the reasons is because fire suppression. So when fires start, like we, historically have put them out, and that has allowed more trees to survive than would probably happen under natural conditions. And so therefore, when fires do start, and they get out of control, we're unable to suppress them, what you get is less frequent but higher intensity fires than maybe under historical natural conditions. When you got frequent fires but of less intensity. And so I think that's why you're seeing these kind of large infernos that are hundreds of thousands of acres, that spread rapidly and do a lot of devastation, both to the natural environment and obviously to people and their communities.
You've talked to a lot of firefighters on the ground, fire chiefs in multiple cities in California. What are they saying about how fires have behaved the past few years?
Well, I think that you're seeing a lot of stories this year in particular that talk about unprecedented fire behavior. And I think it's because of the unprecedented nature of how dry uh, what they call fuels, but which are basically vegetation, are right now. It's impossible to overstate the effects of the drought that probably began, probably I would say like 7 or 8 years ago. Obviously, we got a couple of, good wet seasons intermittently in between, but really we've had kind of an extended drought more or less for like the last decade. When I went to Paradise, I talked to firefighters who fought that fire, and they likened it to a bomb going off, and that's what Paradise looked like. I mean, that town, which was of course victimized by the Camp Fire in 2018, 85 people perished in that. I mean, it looked like a war scene. It was utterly devastated. Entire neighborhoods, you saw cars where their steel frame was the only thing that was left of them. Entire houses incinerated with stone chimneys being the only thing that is left. I mean, just scenes of utter devastation.
Are the worst wildfires concentrated in a certain portion of the state?
They're concentrated basically in the forested areas of Northern California. There's a difference between a kind of large grass fire that's also burning some trees and then some of the infernos that you get in a heavily forested place like Northern California. I saw the Creek Fire recently and the Glass Fire, and those fires are basically they're what are called crown fires. So they're not just burning on the ground, they're growing up into the trees, and then they're basically just consuming entire swaths of forest. And I think that area of Northern California is more susceptible to the kind of devastation that you see in Paradise.
Can you talk specifically about how the drought in the West and in California the past, decade plus has exacerbated the devastation caused by wildfires here?
I think one of the important things to note about the Creek Fire in particular is, as when I talked to firefighters after I was responding to that, they talked about the conditions of the forest being extremely unhealthy. And I think when you get towards the southern reach of the Sierra Nevada mountains and the western foothills, where a lot of the forests of California are, you see a high degree of tree mortality. And it's a combination of things. I know that there's been a bark beetle infestation, which has really harmed trees there. But from the foresters and tree experts that I've talked to, that the bark beetles are being so successful largely because the trees are weakened by a lack of water. Trees are stressed because of a lack of water and makes them unhealthy. Then because they're unhealthy, they're more susceptible to insect invasion, which means more of them die. And if they're not removed or managed in a timely manner, then they're basically just fodder for fire. When you have unhealthy forests, you have conditions that are really amenable to big, large, devastating wildland fires.
Well, you're a Californian and I'm a Californian, and wildfires are, a way of life here. In San Diego, we refer to it as fire season. I imagine it may be the same up where you are. Can you explain for people who don't live in regions that are ravaged by annual wildfires what the impact of that is on Californians?
It's really interesting that you bring up fire season, because I think it needs to be acknowledged that there's like almost no such thing anymore. That like all year round is fire season. And that is an entirely new reality that firefighters and people who live in California have to face. And it's created, I think, by the drought. I think that this year is a perfect example. We had a very poor winter this year in terms of rain. The forest conditions that you saw in May and July were typically, in terms of fuel moisture content and the amount of water that was in the forests, were typically conditions that firefighters would encounter more towards this time of year, right? August and September. So in California, traditionally, fire season kind of begins right now, I'd say, about early to mid-August, and then runs through, well, the first rain, which you're hoping is maybe October, maybe November. But now, when you don't have, sufficient rain or sufficient precipitation during the winter, um, the fire season extends itself. I think the Dixie Fire is a great example. I mean, it started on July 15th. I think traditionally, if this were 15 years ago, a fire that started on July 15th would have trouble kind of getting up and running because there would still be enough moisture left over from the winter months to make it difficult for that fire to really get going. But now, because the forests are basically a tinderbox, and it basically starts in May and June. You get a fire season that begins earlier and basically lasts until we get our first storm, which hopefully comes early this year.